The door shattered, shards flying like shrapnel. A bitter ex-cop, eyes blazing with contempt, stormed in, handcuffs swinging like a noose. "You're a liar," he bellowed, yanking her wrists back, the cold steel biting her skin. She was mid-briefing, commanding a classified Pentagon call, her voice steady until his betrayal cut deeper than the cuffs. "No woman like you is a general," he spat, crushing her years of sacrifice under his sneer. Her heart screamed, but her gaze burned. "You've just destroyed yourself," she whispered. Then, 5 black SUVs roared into the drive, their engines a reckoning. This is her story. The sting of the cuffs lingered, but I held my ground, staring down the man who thought he could erase me. "My name is Claire Thompson, a major general in the U.S. Army, leading a classified operation from a secure officer's residence in Atlanta, Georgia. Just moments ago, my stepfather, Robert Malone, a retired Atlanta police chief, had burst into my briefing, convinced I was a fraud. His rage wasn't new, it was a fire stoked over decades, fueled by his refusal to see a woman like me command power he'd never touch. I wasn't supposed to be here. My apartment in Arlington, Virginia, 600 miles away, was gutted by a flash flood 2 weeks ago, electrical systems fried, walls crumbling. The Army offered a secure facility, but my mother, Laura, insisted I stay with her. "It's just for a month, Claire," she said, her voice soft over the phone. "Robert won't bother you." I should have known better. Laura, a retired nurse, always saw the good in him, blind to the control he craved. This house, a squat 2-story in a gated military community, was my temporary command center. Encrypted laptops lined my desk, red lights blinking to signal live Pentagon calls. I was coordinating a high-stakes extraction, briefing generals 3,000 miles away. But Robert? He saw my locked door, my headset, and scoffed. "What's with the spy games, Claire?" he'd sneered yesterday, leaning against the kitchen counter. "You pushing papers or playing war?" His words were a blade, cutting at the rank I'd earned through sweat and sleepless nights. Now, with my wrists bruised and generals disconnected, I knew this wasn't just doubt, it was war. The echo of Robert Malone's accusation, calling me a fraud, clawed at wounds I'd buried long ago. As I stood in my mother's Atlanta home, wrists still raw from his cuffs, my mind drifted back to the girl I used to be, the one he tried to break before I even knew my own strength. My name is Claire Thompson, and my journey to Major General wasn't just a career, it was a rebellion against the man who thought I'd never be enough. I was 8 when my world shattered. My father, Captain Daniel Thompson, a Marine pilot, died in a training crash 50 miles off the Georgia coast. I can still see my mother, Laura, crumpling onto the living room floor, her sobs muffled by the hands of a uniformed officer. She was a nurse then, working 12-hour shifts at Grady Memorial Hospital, always smelling faintly of antiseptic. After Dad's death, she became a ghost of herself, her laughter replaced by a quiet resolve to keep us afloat. I learned early to carry my grief silently, to be strong for her. 4 years later, when I was 12, Robert Malone entered our lives. He was a towering figure, Atlanta's new police chief, with a handshake that could crush bones and a voice that filled rooms. Laura met him at a hospital fundraiser, and within 18 months, they were married. At first, I thought he'd fill the void Dad left. He fixed the porch swing, grilled burgers on Sundays, and called me sport. But beneath the charm was a need for control. "Don't talk back, Claire," he'd snap when I asked why he locked his study door. "Kids don't need to know everything." By 14, I knew I wanted to be a Marine like Dad. I'd spend hours in my room, sketching helicopters, reading about military strategy. When I told Robert, his laugh was a blade. "The Marines?" he scoffed, leaning back in his recliner, a beer in hand. "You'd faint at the first drill, sweetheart. Stick to something softer." His words stung, but they lit a fire. I joined Junior ROTC that fall, marching in the Georgia heat, my boots pounding the asphalt. Robert came to one parade, arms crossed, muttering to a neighbor, "She's just playing soldier. She'll quit." I didn't. Laura tried to bridge the gap. "He's proud of you, Claire," she'd say, her eyes pleading. But pride wasn't what I saw in Robert's smirk when I won a ROTC scholarship to West Point at 17. "West Point's tough," he said, handing me a soda at my graduation party. "Don't cry when they send you home." Laura beamed, oblivious to the venom in his tone. I left for New York with $200 in a duffel bag, vowing to prove him wrong. West Point was a crucible. I woke at 5 a.m., ran 6 miles in the rain, studied logistics until my eyes burned. I graduated in the top 5%, commissioned as a second lieutenant at 21. By 25, I was in Afghanistan, coordinating supply chains under mortar fire. At 30, I briefed Pentagon officials on counterintelligence, my voice steady as generals nodded. Each promotion, captain, major, colonel, felt like a brick in a wall I built against Robert's doubt. But I stopped sharing my victories. When Laura asked about my work, I'd say, "Just logistics, Mom," because Robert's questions weren't curious, they were traps. He'd corner me during visits home, his badge still pinned to his ego. "What's a logistics girl doing with classified clearance?" he'd probe, eyes narrowing. "Sounds like a fancy title for paperwork." His disbelief grew with my rank. By the time I became Major General at 38, leading a covert extraction operation, I'd learned to keep my stars hidden. Not for fear, but survival. Robert didn't just doubt me, he resented me, a woman who'd outgrown his shadow. Now, standing in this house, his cuffs a fresh scar, I realized his hatred wasn't about my rank. It was about his own fragility, a man who needed to diminish me to feel tall. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was Claire Thompson, and I'd built an empire of resilience he'd never understand. The weight of Robert Malone's contempt had haunted me for years, but now, in my mother's Atlanta home, it was no longer a shadow, it was a storm. My wrist still bore the faint marks of his cuffs, a reminder of the line he'd crossed. As Major General Claire Thompson, I'd faced insurgents and deadlines that could cost lives, but Robert's refusal to see me as anything but a pretender was a battle I hadn't prepared for. In this 2-story house, my temporary command center for a classified Pentagon operation, his doubt was turning into something far more dangerous. I'd been in Atlanta for 10 days, my equipment transforming Laura's guest room into a fortress of blinking red lights and encrypted servers. My days were a blur of secure calls, coordinating an extraction 4,000 miles away, my voice steady as I briefed Tuong Harris and his team. Laura respected my space, knocking softly with coffee or a whispered, "Need anything, honey?" But Robert was a different beast. His footsteps lingered outside my door, heavy and deliberate, like a predator circling. On day 3, he'd barged in during a call, claiming he needed a screwdriver from the closet. "What's with all the secrecy, Claire?" he'd asked, his eyes scanning my laptops. "You hiding something?" I'd forced a smile, my mic muted, and said, "Just work, Robert. Please leave." He'd smirked, but his gaze was a blade. By day 5, his intrusions grew bolder. I caught him hovering in the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear, muttering about suspicious activity. Laura brushed it off. "He's just restless, Claire," she said, stirring soup in the kitchen. "Retirement's hard on him." But I wasn't fooled. I found a notepad by the phone, scrawled with terms from my calls: asset relocation, secure perimeter, misspelled but unmistakable. Robert wasn't just curious, he was building a case. His police instincts, honed over 30 years, had twisted into paranoia. He didn't see a general, he saw a threat to his authority. On day 7, I noticed my laptop security log. Someone had tried to access it at 2 a.m. My stomach churned. I installed a biometric lock and moved my files to a secondary drive, but the violation lingered like a bruise. That night, at dinner, Robert's questions turned pointed. "Who's this Harris guy you keep mentioning?" he asked, cutting his steak with precision. "Some big shot you're trying to impress?" Laura glanced at me, uneasy, but I kept my tone even. "He's my commanding officer, Robert. That's all you need to know." He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Funny how you never talk about your work. What kind of soldier hides from her own family?" I gripped my fork, my pulse racing, but said nothing. Silence was my shield. The next morning, I overheard him in the garage, his voice low but sharp. "She's got encrypted systems in there, Mike," he told a friend, a deputy still on the force. "Nobody checks her credentials. What if she's selling secrets?" My blood ran cold. Robert wasn't just doubting me, he was accusing me of treason. I checked the Atlanta PD's online portal later that day, using a secure VPN. Robert still had limited access to their database, and he'd been running searches on my contacts, including Tuong Harris. His notes, now tucked in a drawer, listed call times and phrases like possible espionage. He was preparing to expose me. By day 9, the air in the house was thick with tension. Laura sensed it, her hands trembling as she poured tea. "Can't you two just get along?" she pleaded. I wanted to scream that Robert was crossing lines she couldn't see, but I held back. My operation was at a critical stage, and I couldn't afford a confrontation, not yet. But Robert had other plans. That night, I found him outside my room, a flashlight beam dancing under the door. "I know what you're doing, Claire," he hissed through the wood. "And I'm gonna stop you." His words weren't a threat, they were a promise. I locked the door tighter, my heart pounding, knowing he was ready to strike. The air in the guest room was thick with the hum of encrypted servers, but Robert Malone's threat from the night before, "I'm gonna stop you," hung heavier. As Major General Claire Thompson, I'd orchestrated operations under fire, but nothing braced me for the betrayal unfolding in my mother's Atlanta home. My secure Pentagon briefing was live, Tuong Harris and 3 Joint Chiefs on screen, their faces sharp as we finalized an extraction 4,000 miles away. The clock read 8:02 a.m., and I was mid-sentence, detailing fallback routes, when the door's lock rattled. I ignored it, assuming Laura needed something. Then, with a deafening crack, the doorframe splintered, and Robert stormed in, his face a mask of righteous fury. "Enough of your lies, Claire," he roared, handcuffs flashing in his grip. My headset slipped as he lunged, yanking my wrists behind me. The steel clamped down, biting into my skin, and the briefing screen froze, Tuong Harris's eyes narrowing. "You're no general." Robert spat, his voice trembling with conviction. "You're a fraud, and I'm ending this scam now." The injustice seared through me, decades of sacrifice, missions in war zones, all reduced to his delusion. My mother, Laura, appeared in the doorway, her hands clutching her robe. "Robert, stop," she gasped, but he shoved past her, dragging me toward the center of the room. I didn't flinch. My training kicked in, my voice low and steady. "Robert, you're making a catastrophic mistake." He laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. "Mistake? I've got evidence, your calls, your classified nonsense. You're done." On the screen, Tuong Harris leaned forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Major General Thompson, report status." Robert's head snapped toward the monitor, confusion flickering, but he doubled down. "She's impersonating an officer," he shouted, pointing at me like a prosecutor. "Arrest her, not me." My pulse raced, but I locked eyes with the screen. "Tuong Harris," I said, each word deliberate, "initiate Protocol Omega. Now." Harris nodded once, his face grim. "Confirmed." Security dispatched. The screen went black, red lights on my servers pulsing like a heartbeat. Robert's grip tightened, his breath hot against my ear. "You think some fancy app scares me? I've locked up bigger crooks than you." Laura sobbed, "Robert, please, let her go," but he ignored her, his ego a runaway train. 3 minutes later, the ground shook. A low rumble grew into a roar as 5 black SUVs screeched into the driveway, tires skidding on asphalt 50 feet from the house. Doors slammed in unison, and tactical boots pounded the pavement. Robert froze, his hands loosening on the cuffs. Through the window, I saw figures in dark uniforms, radios crackling, moving with lethal precision. A commanding voice boomed, "United States Army. Open the door." Laura stumbled to the foyer, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the lock. "Don't, Laura." Robert barked, but it was too late. The front door swung open, and a tall officer strode in, his presence filling the room. "Step away from Major General Claire Thompson," he ordered, his tone like steel. Robert's jaw dropped, the cuffs dangling from his fingers. "No, that's impossible," he stammered. She's just Claire." The officer's eyes didn't waver. "You've restrained the deputy commander of a classified operation. Release her. Now." 2 soldiers flanked me, their movements swift as they unlocked the cuffs. My wrists throbbed, but I stood tall, my gaze piercing Robert's. His face drained of color, his shoulders collapsing as the truth hit like a sledgehammer. The lead officer turned to me. "General Thompson, are you injured?" "Negative," I replied, my voice firm. "But I want him processed for interfering with a federal operation." Robert's eyes widened, his voice a whisper. "I didn't know. I thought," but his words crumbled under the weight of his mistake. Laura sank onto the stairs, her sobs echoing as the soldiers secured the room. Robert's world, his authority, his certainty, lay in ruins, and I was the one still standing. The soldiers' boots faded into the distance, leaving an eerie silence in the Atlanta house, but the weight of Robert Malone's betrayal pressed harder than the cuffs he'd snapped on me. As Major General Claire Thompson, I just watched my stepfather crumble under the truth of my rank, his world shattered by the 5 black SUVs that roared into his reality. Yet, standing in the wreckage of my mother's living room, my wrists bruised and my heart raw, I felt no victory, only a deep, aching void. The battle wasn't over, it had shifted inward, to the wounds I'd carried since childhood, now torn open by the one person who should have protected me. Laura, my mother, sat on the stairs, her face buried in her hands, her sobs cutting through the stillness like a knife. The soldiers had escorted Robert to a holding area outside, his protests reduced to a faint murmur beyond the walls. I knelt beside her, my uniform creased, the weight of my stars heavy on my shoulders. "Mom," I said softly, "it's over." She looked up, her eyes red and searching, as if seeing me for the first time. "Claire, I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me you were this?" The question stung deeper than Robert's cuffs. I sat back, the hardwood floor cold beneath me, and let the truth spill out. "I hid it because of him," I said, my voice steady but laced with pain. "Every time I came home, Robert called me a dreamer, a fake. He told you I'd never amount to anything, and you," I paused, the words catching in my throat. "You let him." Laura's eyes widened, her hands trembling. "I thought he was joking," she said, her voice barely audible. "I thought he was proud, in his own way." "Proud?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "When I got into West Point, he said I'd fail. When I made colonel, he laughed and called it a quota promotion. And you never stopped him, Mom. You chose peace over me." The room felt smaller, the air thick with years of unspoken hurt. Laura's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice a fragile thread. "After your father died, I needed stability. Robert was safe. I didn't see how he hurt you." Her confession was a blade, slicing through the armor I'd built. I remembered the nights I'd cried myself to sleep at 14, Robert's voice echoing in my head, "You're no soldier." I remembered Laura's silence, her gentle smile as she changed the subject. "I needed you to see me," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "Not as his stepdaughter, not as a burden, but as your daughter, who fought for every inch of this life." I gestured to my uniform, the insignia gleaming under the dim light. "I built this without him, but I wanted you to be part of it." Laura reached for my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. "I failed you, Claire," she said, her voice thick with regret. I saw his anger, but I told myself it was just his way. "I didn't know you were carrying this greatness." Her words were a balm and a wound, soothing yet piercing. I wanted to pull away, to shield myself from the pain, but I stayed, rooted by the hope of something new. Outside, the hum of military radios crackled, a reminder of the operation I'd paused to survive this moment. I stood, helping Laura to her feet. "We can't change the past," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "But we can start now." Her eyes met mine, a flicker of resolve breaking through her grief. The pain was still there, raw and jagged, but it was no longer a wall between us. It was a bridge, fragile but real, waiting for us to cross. The fragile bridge between my mother, Laura, and me still trembled under the weight of our shared pain, but the storm of Robert Malone's betrayal was far from over. As Major General Claire Thompson, I stood in the Atlanta house where I'd reclaimed my truth, the echo of 5 black SUVs still reverberating in my mind. Yet, the victory over Robert's delusion felt hollow, overshadowed by the scars he'd carved into our family. Now, with the soldiers gone and the operation paused, I faced the aftermath, not just of his actions, but of a lifetime spent proving I was enough. Laura stood by the living room window, her silhouette framed against the fading Georgia sunlight, 100 feet from where Robert had been led away in disgrace. The military team had taken him to a secure facility 10 miles outside Atlanta for processing, his badge and pride stripped away. I'd requested a military review, not out of mercy, but to shield Laura from the public fallout of a federal trial. "He'll face charges," I told her, my voice steady as we sat on the worn couch. "Interfering with a classified operation, misuse of police authority, he's done." Laura nodded, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, but her eyes were distant, grappling with the man she thought she knew. I arranged for Laura to move to a temporary officer's residence 2 miles away, a quiet condo with a view of Piedmont Park. "You'll be safe there," I said, handing her a key. "No reporters, no Robert." She took it, her hand trembling. "I married him to feel secure," she said, her voice a whisper. How did I miss this? The question wasn't for me, but I answered anyway. "He hid his fear behind control, Mom. And we paid the price." Her lips quivered, but she didn't cry, not this time. It was the first step toward her reclaiming herself. The next day, I drove to the secure facility, a squat concrete building surrounded by razor wire. Robert sat in a holding room, his face haggard, the bravado that once defined him reduced to ash. I didn't come to gloat, I came to close a chapter. "Claire," he said, his voice hoarse as I entered, "I didn't mean," I cut him off, my gaze unflinching. "You meant every word, Robert. You called me a fraud, a liar, because you couldn't stand a woman outranking you." He looked down, his hands clasped tight. "I thought I was protecting Laura, the community," he mumbled. "I saw your gear, your calls, and I got it wrong." "Wrong?" I said, my voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't just doubt me, you tried to erase me. You told me I'd never be a soldier, never be enough. And when I proved you wrong, you chose handcuffs over truth." His eyes met mine, hollow and defeated. "What happens now?" he asked. "You lose everything," I replied. "Your credentials, your access, your reputation. The army will handle the rest." I stood, my boots echoing on the tile. "You don't get to define me anymore." As I walked out, his silence was louder than any apology he could have offered. Back at the house, I packed my equipment, the red lights on my servers now dim. Tuong Harris had confirmed the operation was secure, rescheduled for dawn. Laura called from the condo, her voice stronger. "I'm keeping the key, Claire," she said. "And I'm done with him." It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a start. I looked around the room where Robert had tried to break me, and for the first time, I saw it as just a house, not a battlefield. The conflict was over, not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen to walk away, carrying my truth like a shield. The Atlanta house, once a battlefield of betrayal, now stood quiet, its walls no longer echoing Robert Malone's accusations or the roar of black SUVs. As Major General Claire Thompson, I'd faced my stepfather's wrath and my mother Laura's regret, emerging not as a victor, but as a woman who'd reclaimed her truth. Yet, standing in the guest room where I'd been cuffed, my stars gleaming under the soft Georgia light, I realized this story wasn't just mine. It was for anyone who'd been told their fire was too bright, their dreams too big. Power, I've learned, isn't the loud clash of authority Robert craved. It's the quiet resolve to stand tall when the world demands you shrink. You're no general, he'd sneered, his voice a chain meant to bind me. But I broke free, not with shouts, but with the strength forged in years of proving myself, on battlefields 4,000 miles away, in briefing rooms, and in the silence of my own heart. That strength is yours, too. When someone calls you less than, let their words be fuel, not shackles. Here's what I carry forward, and what you can, too. First, believe in your worth, even when the loudest voices doubt you. I walked into West Point at 17, Robert's laughter ringing in my ears, but I graduated because I trusted my own path. Second, set boundaries like steel. I locked my door against Robert's intrusions, and you can guard your space from those who seek to control. Third, find your people, those who see your light, like Tuong Harris, who trusted my command without question. They're your armor against the storm. Laura's voice still echoes in my mind, trembling as she said, I failed you, Claire. But her choice to leave Robert, to step into her own strength, taught me that healing begins when we face the truth. So, to every woman told she's too much, too loud, too bold, keep rising. Your story isn't written by those who chain you, it's carved by the steps you take, unshackled, toward the life you deserve. The Atlanta house, once a cage of Robert Malone's doubt, now felt like a chapter closed, its silence a testament to the strength I'd reclaimed. As Major General Claire Thompson, I'd faced my stepfather's handcuffs, my mother Laura's regret, and the weight of my own scars, emerging not just as a soldier, but as a beacon for those still fighting to be seen. Standing in the guest room, my equipment packed and the dawn of a new mission 3,000 miles away on the horizon, I felt the pulse of a story that wasn't meant to end here. This is your story, too, and it's time to share it. If my journey, from a girl dismissed by Robert's sneers to a general commanding respect, stirred something in you, don't let it fade. You're too much, he'd said, but I turned those words into wings. What's the voice holding you back? You're not enough, it might whisper. Share it in the comments below. Your story, your truth, could light a spark for someone else, just as Laura's choice to break free inspired me. Hit that like button if you believe in rising above doubt, and share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their strength matters. Subscribe and ring the bell to join this community of warriors, people like you, like me, who refuse to be chained. Next week, I'll bring you another story of breaking through, one that'll hit 100 feet closer to your heart. Claire, Laura said before I left, her voice steady, you showed me I can start again. You can, too. Your voice is your power, use it now.